To minimize losses among his horsemen, Attila decided to lead a long war. Above all, he wanted to consolidate his northern empire and increase its prestige. To this end he took the Balkan towns without hurry, and sent messengers to all the peoples and tribes of his empire, with dispatches on the new victories. The warriors of the steppes did not like long campaigns outside the steppes. This was why the troops continued to rotate. After a few months of battles, the warriors returned to their country to rest. This made it possible to introduce youth to military operations in an unusual situation, to have always fresh troops. To give a sense of belonging to the empire even to the most remote and savage tribes. The warriors returned home covered with glory and brought trophies. After rest, they set out again for the Balkan front. For them the war was not too dangerous. Hand-to-hand combat was rare. Often the Huns would shoot the opposing soldiers of their composite bows with double curvature, while being out of reach of the weak Roman, Gallic and Gothic archers. A large number of inhabitants of the occupied territories were taken into captivity. But the Huns did not behave as the Romans did to their slaves. Craftsmen, doctors and teachers were estimated. Most of them held public office. Edecon with his army almost reached Constantinople and stopped at Arcadiopolis. Having received the order of Attila to spare the life of his warriors and not to go further towards the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, Theodosius gathered all his forces under the command of Asper, his general of Alan origin, stripping the Persian frontier and having ceased operations against the Vandals. This great army, crushed under the blows of the armies of Wanges and Edecon, was obliged to take refuge at Constantinople. Wanges also took up a position not far from Constantinople. In the meantime, Attila took Nace, the birthplace of Constantine the Great, and also headed for the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Attila gathers his generals at Arcadiopolis and orders to continue to block Constantinople to the west and north. He declares that he decides to give his horsemen a rest before the final phase of the war. Attila, too, feels strongly the nostalgia of the great spaces of the steppes. After his victories, he is quiet for the Balkan front, whose command during his absence is entrusted to Edecon. The remaining troops are composed of ancient Roman mercenaries and slaves. Orestes must manage the occupied territories. Wanges, under the control of Jericho, becomes responsible for the security of the capital and the possessions of the Danes. Attila explains to his collaborators, "I am informed of an armed conflict between the Georgians and the Tabgates, as well as the aggression of the Georgians against the neutral tribes of the Altai Mountains. These tribes are weakened after the departure of the Huns Hephthalites to the conquest of Central Asia. I am obliged to show myself to the east with my army." Thus, in 444 to 445, the army of Edecon quietly watches the actions of the Romans, who are happy with the unexpected respite and do not disturb the Huns, nevertheless installed next to their capital. Orestes directs the occupied territories from Sirmium. It occupies the former palace of the Caesars of the East, which gives its power more legitimacy. Among his many preoccupations, the governor does not forget the order of Attila to investigate the murder of the bishop of that city. Yet this murder was perceived by the population as a normal gesture on the part of the barbarians, and the investigation does not advance. Relations with the Western Empire remain normal. Orestes and the other Romans, officials of the Huns, can visit their families without difficulty in the territories under the authority of Ravenna. One of the secretaries returns with an interesting news. the bishop of our city bought the gold vases of the church of Sirmium from a banker in Rome for a modest price. Orestes sends him back to Italy after consulting the list of trophies taken at Sirmium, for the church of Sirmium has not been plundered. Some valuables, taken as a war contribution, were carefully recorded and kept in the treasury of his army. Soon Orestes learns that the suspect vases were bought from a pawnbroker named Silvanus, who runs a banker's shop on a square in Rome. Orestes immediately sends an investigator who interrogates Silvanus and learns that the vases in question have been pledged of a loan by Constans, who has not repaid it on the date fixed. Orestes summons the alleged culprit, who does not deny anything. Yes, it was I who killed the bishop. Why, Constans? The brilliance of gold has blinded me, and I have committed this crime. But I did not know that I would suffer so terribly from remorse. Before I thought I was not a believer, but now I have a terrible fear of hell. How did you get his vases? Constans recounts the bishop's request. During the capture of the city, I quickly found the priest who gave me these vases. I watched them for a long time shine under the light of day. I never held objects of such value in my hands, and I had an irresistible desire to keep this treasure for myself. Knowing that the bishop would soon be released, I decided to remove it. Orestes closes his eyes for a moment, then exclaims, I am horrified by your crime, Constans. You know I had great confidence in you. That's why I sent you to negotiate with the bishop. Where is the money you borrowed from Silvanus? It burned my hands. I got rid of him as quickly as possible. It's easy in the eternal city. I beg your pardon for the abuse of your confidence. My life is worth nothing. I want to spend the few remaining days in prayer. Orestes gives a sign and 2 soldiers take Constans to prison. Attila, accompanied by General Beric with part of his cavalry, first organized a great hunt between the Volga and the Urals. A forced demonstration is then carried out next to Altai. The Khan of the Georgians, who tried to take under his control some neutral tribes during the Attila war with the Eastern Roman Empire, did not dare to go to the conflict. It is therefore decided to keep fraternal relations between the descendants of the same ancestors. After a grandiose hunting of 3 months in the land of the ancestors and a raid in Central Asia during the return, Attila gives rest to his army next to the second capital city in the steppe. He discusses much and sincerely with his eldest son Elik, Khan of Eastern Hunland. Thus, Elik asks his father, why are your armies on the Balkans commanded by strangers, Orestes and Wonges? It is true that Wonges is my teacher, but he could remain a counselor listened to. Attila explains, I keep the general command. But these 2 generals know perfectly well the theatre of hostilities and the army of the adversary. That's why they're very useful. Thanks to them we were able to quickly achieve great success with minimal losses. In addition, I seriously begin to test the possibility of the realization of the Pax Hunna Romana, and I am happy with the first results. Elik looks attentively at his father. Several princes do not understand this idea. It seems dangerous to them. We could act with the Roman empires as acting Modern Khan and other great ancestors with the Chinese Empire. Defeat them and take tribute. Be vigilant with submissive peoples. Indeed, much Hun blood has flowed for our victories. Do not use the Germanic infantry with which we now share the spoils of war. Attila interrupts. I will order Beric to take care of some of these princes. They must be replaced by more intelligent men. Indeed, everyone knows the experience of the Tabgachas, who no longer shed their blood, nor the blood of the Chinese, and now have more income than a tribute. The noble Orestes, installed in one of the ancient capitals of the Roman Empire, manages the occupied territories more effectively than any Hun general. Gallic objects. The Tabgic merchants who visit us and their guards speak with the Chinese accent. Soon they will turn into Chinese. I do not want our descendants to be equated with horseless, pedestrian peoples and lose their courage and energy. Attila says quietly, "We will consider how to avoid this possibility. But I'm passionate about what's going on in the West. The Germanic kings, whom we have never attacked and vanquished, begin to come and see me and to discuss, and even the representatives of the Gallic peasants and other interesting people. All those who do not want the establishment of anarchy dangerous on the ruins of the decaying Roman Empire. They feel that a new world is born and want to participate in its creation. They are not seekers of adventures. No, they are serious men. That is why I choose among them diplomats, ministers and sometimes even generals. Observe them. Many of them occupied high positions in their countries. They came to us after weighing their decision. Do not think that they serve me so faithfully only by fear or even by duty. No. They understand my system and want to contribute to its realization." Perplexed and sad, Gallic looks at his father and changes the subject of conversation.